Well, Jotam Confino is the foreign editor of Jewish News UK. He joins us live from Tel Aviv now. Jotam, good to see you. Is Netanyahu's promise of a date being set for an invasion of Rafah taken seriously? Obviously, we don't know when it is. He wants that element of surprise to be there. But with the southern withdrawal, for example, over the weekend, which we talked about actually on my shows at the weekend, really, he's talking about those forces being prepared for that invasion of Rafah. What can we expect?
First of all, I don't think that anyone believes Netanyahu, not in Israel or abroad. In fact, the United States said shortly after his announcement that they were not informed about any date for a ground invasion of Rafah. If anyone were to know about that, it would be the United States because they coordinate everything closely. So this is just another gimmick by Netanyahu. And the reason why he's doing that is because early in the day, one of his ministers in the government threatened to topple him if the IDF doesn't launch a ground invasion in Rafah. So we had to push back on speculations that this ground invasion has been called off. And therefore, he went out and said that there's a date. Again, I don't think anyone really believes him.
How vulnerable do you think Benjamin Netanyahu actually is? Because people often think of his government as stable, but actually there are so many people within it, including people like Gantz, for example, who are just not completely on board with what he's doing. How isolated is he? And tell us about those calls for an election as well, even though Israel is in a state of war.
So first of all, Benny Gantz is a very interesting figure because he is widely seen as the one to become Israel's next prime minister. Every poll for the past couple of months has shown that he's tripling his mandates. He's far more popular than Netanyahu, and he could easily form a government if elections were called tomorrow. That's why he, for the first time since October 7th, said there needs to be a date for election, September 1st. So we can expect that if Netanyahu hasn't called for elections by the next couple of months, Benny Gantz will withdraw from the government. And not only that, other ministers in his government also smell blood. They know that Netanyahu's days are probably numbered, and they try to capitalize on the situation, which is why you have the far-right ministers saying the current situation, the current handling of Gaza and Hamas is too weak. Israel needs to be much more aggressive. They can't pull troops out of southern Gaza, and they demand an invasion of Rafah. So everyone is smelling blood, and that's why I think that it's just a matter of time, really, before he'll be toppled.
And Jotam, we know that for the past 6 months, Israel has kind of had two objectives in this war, to retrieve hostages and to eliminate Hamas. Why the focus on Rafah now? Why would they be going in there? Would it be to complete both of those objectives? Or is it because they believe specifically that there are Israeli hostages being held in that area?
It's to achieve both objectives, really. First of all, Hamas still has 4 battalions left in Rafah. That's roughly 4,000 people. They're still operating in Rafah, which means that if you want to eradicate Hamas from Gaza, you have to go in there. It's as simple as that. Second of all, Israel believes that a lot of the hostages are held in Rafah. So either way, you need to go in there to get rid of Hamas, but also to get the hostages free. Now, in terms of the hostages, we are really looking at a horrific situation right now. They keep being announced killed. We assume that around 50 of them are no longer alive, and Hamas knows that pressure is increasing on Israel, and time is on Hamas's side, which is why they keep turning down every ceasefire proposal that is coming out of Cairo or Qatar. They did it this morning. This is the 4th ceasefire proposal they turned down, and they're doing it because they know that it's in their interest to drag this on as long as possible, because Israel eventually will probably have to be strong-armed into stopping the war. At least that's what Hamas hopes. I don't think that that's going to happen, but that's what they're counting on.
And Jotam, what about the displaced Palestinians who are sheltering in Rafah? Has there been any advice as to where they should go to and where they should seek refuge?
Yes, so the United States and Israel held a conversation last week where they spoke about this particular issue. It was a very tense conversation, according to one of the sources that I spoke to, who is familiar with this meeting. And it was tense because the United States doesn't believe that Israel has a proper evacuation plan ready. Apparently, Israel wants to evacuate those 1.4 million civilians just north of the city, and they want to set up some sort of like a tent city, tent islands. And that's why we heard also yesterday Israeli media reporting that the government is preparing to send 40,000 tents into Gaza, specifically to Rafah, apparently. So that's Israel's plan, but it's not viable according to the United States. And that's why they keep saying, don't go into Rafah until you have a proper plan to evacuate. It's an incredible difficult task. And it's something that's not going to be easy because of Gaza's size. But nevertheless, if Israel wants to go in there and get the backing of the United States, they need to come up with a plan to evacuate the civilians in Rafah.
Just briefly, Jotam, what are we hearing about potential ceasefire coming? Those negotiations in Cairo seem to be, we seem to be getting mixed messages in terms of what's actually happening.
Mixed messages indeed, but nevertheless, still Hamas demanding that Israel fully withdraw from Gaza and a permanent ceasefire, which Israel cannot agree to. So Hamas is single-handedly preventing a ceasefire from happening. And I think that a lot of people ought to know that, because when you talk about ceasefire, you can blame Israel for not being flexible enough, but at least they're trying to compromise. Hamas is not compromising whatsoever, and it's
they're using the hostages as a bargaining chip, which is absolutely horrendous 6 months on. Jotam, thank you. Jotam Confino there from Jewish News UK.